thank you again, everyone, for joining us. If you were coming in from the waiting room, you may have missed what I said before, but don't worry, I will cover it again. My name is Bianca. I am the Director of Development and Communications for the Animal Protection Party and Animal Alliance of Canada. We're joined by Leah, who is also a co-host, and Leah is the CEO of Animal Alliance of Canada and an officer with the Animal Protection Party or chief agent, sorry. And then we've got Liz White, who is going to be your presenter today for the webinar. And Liz is the leader and co-founder of the Animal Protection Party of Canada. She has spent over 40 years as a community activist, working on a range of progressive issues, including animal protection and advocating for the disadvantaged. She has participated on a number of government advisory councils at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels, and has worked for animal and environmental protection since 1987. So Liz is a wealth of knowledge. She will be delivering today's presentation to you, which is titled From Election to Action, Influencing Animal Policy. And this is a follow-up presentation after the webinar that we hosted before the election. So we hope that you will have some tangible takeaways from this presentation. There will be a live Q&A session at the end of the webinar presentation where you'll be able to submit any questions that you have and Liz will answer them. To submit a question, there is a Q&A box towards the bottom taskbar of your screen. You'll see it's labeled Q&A. You can submit the questions, and then at the end of the presentation during the Q&A, I will read them off. I won't read anyone's names out loud unless you personally want to say hi to Liz and you want me to mention your name, then I will, but otherwise, the Q&A is completely anonymous. So with all of that, I will leave it to Liz. Leah will be controlling our slides today, and Liz will be presenting.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so very much for coming today. I think a follow-up after the election, which is kind of an exciting time because it's a little bit different than what we normally do, is to figure out how to actually put animal protection policy into play at the federal level, the provincial level, and the municipal level. And it's a good time to look at it after the election. So just to sort of give you a highlight about today's discussion, the first is an overview of municipal, provincial, and federal roles in animal protection legislation and enforcement and action. The second is how to effectively advocate and contact elected officials so that you get your desired point across and see if you can get them to actually do something about it. The third is we'll do a briefing on the long-tailed macaque campaign and the political developments that have occurred since we last had information out about it. The fourth is action-ready resources to support your advocacy. So we're trying to give you lots of packages to actually use if you need to during your advocacy experience. And the fifth will be the question and answer. So why does your voice matter? I talk to so many people on the phone who call me to say, I want you to do this. And I love to hear from them and I want to help. But I have to explain to everybody that it matters that you express your opinion in the area where you vote. So where you vote municipally, provincially, and federally. The post-election opportunity that we are given is that new members of parliament are setting priorities. So this is an excellent time to actually talk to people about whether they could insert some of your priorities in what they're talking about. Citizen influence is also remarkably powerful. Elected officials do listen to constituents' concerns. They want your vote. They want to keep your vote. They'll probably run again. And so you have an opportunity to actually directly contact them and actually have a conversation about your concerns. And there's a collective impact. If you can organize in your community more voices than just yours that would help to drive the policy through, that would be really helpful as well. So understanding government levels in Canada, And each level of authority over different animal issues target the right level for your cause. Now, this is really important because I have people write me to say, I want you to end all animal agriculture in Canada, and without really recognizing that there are levels of government involvement in that issue. So it's really important to determine which government you want to talk to. And the one that's most easy to access are municipal governments, the people who you vote in during municipal elections, city councilors, mayors. They handle things like animal bylaws and services, and whether the local pound in their community actually gives to research. So it's really interesting to contact those people and see if you can get that information out of them. At the provincial level, provinces make animal welfare laws, wealth and wildlife regulations, and municipalities are creatures of the province. And that means that the province has the power to change municipal legislation. And I point to the most recent controversy in Toronto where the Doug Ford Conservative government stepped in and said they're going to remove bike lanes from Toronto, even though that's a municipal issue, because they don't want to have problems with traffic. So it's really important to discern who does what and then how you contact those people. At the federal level, we're talking about national and in fact international. The federal government enacts national laws such as the Criminal Code, and enforces things like the um, Migratory Bird Convention Act, which is a cross-border wildlife bird protection act, and also participates in the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species on the wildlife trade. So there's multi-layers in the federal level as well as the provincial level. So municipal government and animal protection. So let's look at that. In municipal bylaws, local bylaws could include pet licensing rules, leash laws, limits on how many pets you can have, or restrictions on owning exotic animals in the city limits. For example, a city might ban circuses with wild animals, or as Montreal did, ban the horse-drawn carriage by regulating those businesses. And your role in this whole discussion is to engage your mayor and members of council on local animal issues. They can pass motions and raise awareness at City Hall. And it was some of the demonstrations and meetings with city councilors and a elected mayor in Montreal that ultimately left to the ban on horse-drawn carriages in Montreal. So provincial government and animal protection. Provincial laws um, are enacted by provincial laws are enacted by the province, and the province also enforces animal welfare acts, standards for cruelty prevention, shelters, etc. And in Ontario, separate from all the other provinces in Canada, Ontario has an Animals for Research Act. So there is a way to collect some information about animals used in research facilities, at least in one province in Canada. They're also responsible for some wildlife, provincial wildlife, and provincial matters in farming. So provincial jurisdiction over wildlife in the province, such as hunting and trapping, and farm practices, agriculture, except if they're processed at federally regulated slaughterhouses. Then it's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency at the federal level that inspects and regulates slaughterhouses and the transport of those animals across the border. So your role in this regard, if you want to impact animal agriculture or some of the other issues such as trapping, training and trialing compounds, you can contact your member of parliament, your MPP, and in some provinces they're called MLAs, members of legislative assembly, about provincial issues. They have constituency offices open to the public. And it's really important that you make contact with that person because it allows you an entry into ultimately talking to your MPP, which is sometimes hard to do. So the federal government and animal protection. National laws, federal government makes laws like the criminal code, animal cruelty offenses, and other acts that affecting animals, such as the Fisheries Act, which would be, and other acts under the DFO that would regulate sealing and fishing and all sorts of other things. And then again, the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species regulations in Canada to make sure that Canada is compliant with those regulations. International trade, the federal authorities regulate cross-border movement of animals, enforcing CITES for endangered species imports and exports. Agencies such as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency set rules such as transport rules, Environment and Climate Change Canada also enforces wildlife trade, and to some extent, how we deal with climate change. So all of those obviously affect animals, affect us as well, but affect all animals throughout both domestic and wild. So very important agencies. Resources such as the National Food Guide has already made great strides at becoming closer to a vegan diet, and is an area where we can actually make inroads to improve the federal government approving what a good diet for Canadians should look like. So your MP's role, every Canadian MP has a say on federal issues. Ministers, environment, agriculture have specific responsibilities. They can order changes like import bans. But remember, even though all these pieces of legislation that come forward from ministers' offices have to go before the legislature, the House of Commons, for actual approval, and that's where debate, pushing back, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, can actually be really helpful. And if you can engage an MP in that debate and follow that MP, sign into the House for information about what's happening, you can maybe actually have some impact on the legislation. So targeting the right level of government, and this is just a quick advocacy tip. You can focus your efforts where they count. That's the most important thing. As animal advocates, it's truly crucial to identify which level of government has the authority over your issue. You can do a ton of research and work and be talking to the wrong people, and people ultimately get discouraged when they don't make any progress. So do your research ahead of time and find out what level of government you're talking about. If you need help, there are tools in the toolkit that you will get that show that, but it also, you can contact us and we can, if it's really difficult, can try and help you out. So the steps for targeting the correct level of government for campaign issues. To identify the jurisdiction. So the important thing is to determine which level of government controls the issue, local, provincial, and federal. And sometimes that's not quite as clear cut as everybody would like. Sometimes there's cross jurisdictions, and it's really important to try and figure that out ahead of time so you know who might be the most powerful entity in that shared jurisdiction would be the best to talk to identify the correct official. It's really important that you don't lobby the wrong officials. Focus on those with the power to act based on the level of government you are targeting. And that's really easy to say, but I just want to relate to you. I wanted to contact the Environmental Bill of Rights folks over an issue that we had been dealing with over a number of 20 years, and could not find a simple single contact within that website about who I might call, email, text, anything. So sometimes it really takes a lot of work to dig to find out what's happening, but it's really important to do. Outreach. This is really important that you hold the level of government accountable submit personalized letters via direct mail or email. An example, long-tailed macaque campaign. So this is one that we're going to take a little bit deeper dive look at. So the campaign, this is a breakdown in the long-tailed macaque campaign to date. So we know that endangered monkeys are being imported for research labs into Canada. The long-tailed macaques are officially listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, largely because of exploitation and habitat loss. These macaques are used in biomedical research, and there's been a pipeline of them being shipped into Canada. Illegal smuggling ring. In 2022, U.S. investigators uncovered a major smuggling operation exporting wild-caught macaques that were labeled as captive bred to meet the requirements under CITES. The U.S. Department of Justice indicted indicted Cambodian officials and suspended all monkey imports from Cambodia in 2022. And so we contacted Canada to see what they were going to do. And although the US market was cut off, Canada kept importing these monkeys, creating a new demand route. So here's some of the key facts in this. The 6,000 plus monkeys have been imported into Canada in the last 19 months. And these are the endangered macaques from Cambodia. Canada is now the #1 destination for Cambodian macaques. It's likely, we're not entirely sure, but it is very likely, given the numbers that are coming in, that Canada is likely the world's #1 destination for these trafficked macaques, even after the US shut down imports into the United States. So in August 2024, there was an incident regarding macaques, and this exposed the regulatory gaps and the failure to deliver humane treatment of these animals during transport. A cargo plane carrying hundreds of macaques was denied landing by Canadian authorities on August the 9th, 2024, violating transport rules, yet landed the next day at Montreal's Mirabel Airport, and the monkeys were in transit for over 45 hours. If you can imagine, in those cages, in those confined situations, what that must have been like for those animals. Canada has no primate-specific transport regulations, even though we transport not only macaques, but other monkeys into Canada. They're treated as any other animal, legally kept in confinement with no food and water for up to 63 hours. Young victims. Many are babies and juvenile macaques, 1 to 2 years, torn from the wild, often torn from their mother, suffering from extreme stress and high mortality rates. So those are the facts as we know it now, and those are the facts we use to mold our campaign. The political context, Canada's response, but really the lack thereof, I think would be more accurate. Canada is a signatory to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, that's called CITES, which obligates the country to prevent illegal wildlife trade. In July 2024, the CITES Animals Committee raised red flags about Cambodia falsely labeling wild-caught macaques as captive bred and urged heightened security of such exports. While the United States has taken decisive action in response, Canadian authorities have remained silent. Enforcement of CITES falls to each member country, meaning Canada must act, but officials have failed so far to do so. The Animal Protection Party of Canada has called this out, this inaction, as willful ignoring illegal imports, and is urging Canada to suspend all macaque imports from Cambodia pending full investigation. So taking action. How to contact your MP federally and take action to help. To find your MP, it's pretty simple. You use the postal code on the thing you sign in on the House of Commons website to get your MP's name and contact information. That will be pulled up almost immediately, and you'll have address, telephone number, etc. Write a letter or an email. Clearly state the issue. Illegal import of endangered macaques is the statement in the subject and the first line, and you can use our sign-on form. Identify yourself. Let them know you're a constituent, including your address. MPs prioritize messages from their own ridings. They want to talk to the people who voted for them. They want to know who they are and get some feedback. Some of them are more responsive than others, but the more of you give yourself personally to them, the more likely it is that they may contact you and have, even if it's their assistant, and have time to have a conversation about your concerns. State clearly what your ask is. Please urge, so the recommendation in this regard, please urge the government to suspend macaque imports and investigate this issue. Keep it concise and respectful. Briefly explain the key points. Over 6,000 endangered macaques imported into Canada as the US has banned this trade. Canada must act and why you care. I think that's a fairly easy pitch in this one, in that these are endangered animals, but it butts up against a research lobby that is also very difficult to overcome. So the more we write, the more we say, the more we do this, it would be very, very helpful. And the follow-up, if you don't get a reply in a couple of weeks, send a polite follow-up and call their office. It might be even worthwhile to ask a question that they may feel like they should answer, and then maybe you'll get a response. Tips for crafting an effective message. Use key facts. Support your argument with concrete stats or evidence, which you will get on our website. An example, these macaques are endangered and over 6,000 have been imported into Canada, contrary to international efforts to protect them. Stay solutions focused and respectful. I find that when I pick up the phone for many government offices now, that the recording that comes on right ahead of time is that people will not tolerate abusive language or aggressive activities, that kind of thing. And so it's really, really important, so that you're heard by these people, to stay focused and very respectful. These are people who have a very busy day, so they pick up the phone and want to talk to you about the issue. That means you've made some progress into piercing some of their very busy hours in the day. Be personal. I think it's really important to share why you are so passionate about this issue and why it has become so personal for you. And I think that begins to make your message more compelling. It isn't that you're just phoning up to complain, but that you have a real urgency to have something done. And I think that begins to resonate with politicians who hear lots of phone calls all day long. So something that's a little different would be great. Customized templates, if you're using a form letter or the template that we provide, add a few original lines so it doesn't look quite like a duplicate. Unique messages have more impact. Include a question, which is what we talked about before, so that you might get a prompt reply back to that question. And thank them. Acknowledge them for their time and service. Politeness leaves a positive impression, even as you urge action. So this is a list of resources and toolkits for all attendees: a sample letter, contact list, advocacy tip sheets, where to get it, emails, etc., and additional support. We will send you this package so that you have it after the meeting, along with the whatever we're sending out. So the very last thing is remember just to make your voice heard. You might think you're a lone voice in the wilderness, but that is absolutely not true. You'd be surprised how many times I've appeared at meetings and spoken up, and a few other people said, I'm so glad you came because I didn't know what to say, and now I can say I support you. So it's really, really good to make your voice heard. So remember to contact your MP and the minister. If you're dealing with a federal issue, your MPP or MLA if you're dealing with a provincial issue, and a city councilor or mayor if you're dealing with a municipal issue. Ask for the suspension of imports. This is with the long-tailed macaques. Urge the government, federal government, to follow the US example and suspend all imports of Cambodian macaques immediately. This is the clear, achievable action we want them to take now. Spread the word. Encourage friends, family, fellow animal lovers to also contact their MPs. Share the toolkit or campaign information on social media or community groups. More voices equals more impact. And stay engaged. Keep an eye on the updates from us. We will report any progress or lack thereof by officials. If we don't see action, we may organize further campaigns, petitions, rallies, media outreach, etc. And we will need your help to keep in the momentum. And if you are able to talk to your MP, MPP, and you find out that they are remotely sympathetic to the issues that you raise, please let us know so that we can make sure that we contact that person and have a conversation about our organization and about what we're trying to achieve. So support and stay connected. The following below provides you with all the contact information for the party. If you believe in what we're doing, I would hope that you would join us. This is it's been a really interesting experience building a political party in an animal movement because when we started out, there were very few other political parties that were solely focused on animals. And so this is very much an outreach and building experience. So please, if you feel at all moved or you want to help or whatever, please join us in whatever manner you would like, donation, monthly donation, whatever you decide you can do would be wonderful. And by growing the movement online and on the ground, we can begin to influence policy, public opinion year round. And if we build the party substantially over the next 4 years, which is when the next election, federal election comes around, we may be able to run many more candidates than we were able to do this time because of the tightness of the when the writ was dropped. So please stay in contact. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. Thank you so much. So now we're into the Q&A.
Hello, I'm back. That was great, Liz. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, I hope everyone found that helpful. We have some questions here, so I'll start reading them off. And then again, for anyone else who may have a question as we go along, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of the toolbar here. So one of the questions here, Liz, is what steps can be taken if your MLA has expressly indicated they no longer want to hear from you about animal issues? Is there an ombudsman to whom you can bring your concerns that your representative in government is not doing their job of being their constituents' voice?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question because depending on where you live, depending on what your riding is, depending on a whole raft of things, political, it's often difficult to contact people like MPPs to actually support your position, particularly if they don't support your position. Ideally, they're supposed to be there to represent the views of their constituents. But as you can tell politically, people are very much locked into a particular political party, a particular set of beliefs. So it's very hard to sort of peel back all those layers and say, look, can we just have a discussion about this? You know, can we look at the statistics? So it is difficult. I would suggest that if there's a more sympathetic MP um, in your area that you could approach. I would try that. I would maybe try talking to the MP to see what it is about what you're doing that is making that person feel uncomfortable and that you would like to begin to deal with that. At the end of the day, you may have other friends in the community that might actually approach a different um, MP. And at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to say, I'm going to have to wait this out. There isn't anybody who I can contact that will actually make the change. So you can spend your time doing the research and all that sort of stuff in order to get prepared in case there's somebody that you could actually contact that would sit and listen to what you have to say.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Another question here is, do these macaques remain in Canada or are they further transported into the United States?
They come to Canada, not for sure for how long. It's very, very difficult to get this information publicly. It's my understanding that they are shipped in some manner or other, I don't think alive, into the United States because the US has this ban on macaques from Cambodia. So they can't go in, but they do some process on them and they send, I think, body parts to the United States for certain types of testing. Um, Canada has become the the go-between between the illegal and the country that's trying to do something about it, and allowing that trade to flourish, which is really a shame.
We've got another question here. It is macaques related, so I will ask this one, and then there's another question that's not related directly to macaques. What type of research? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what type of research, if you know, Liz, are the monkeys being subjected to, and how would you address the concerns of those who think that it's a necessary evil to save human lives?
Well, there's I guess several ways to answer that. First of all, in terms of importance of saving human lives, what's really I guess frightening to many people is that macaques, most primates, many monkeys, carry all kinds of viruses. They carry tuberculosis, they carry all sorts of diseases. And if these animals are being captured in the wild and forced into a tiny container, living in stressful conditions until they can board a plane and be brought to some country where they sit in a plane for 36 hours and then land and end up in a research facility. The level of stress to those animals, if they are carrying any kind of disease, it means that that animal has a much harder time fighting that disease. And if it's communicable to humans, like tuberculosis, it becomes a public health issue. And so, the problem is it's very, very difficult to get the proper paperwork to find out what's happening to these animals. Most of them are used for things like vaccines, viruses, all sorts of different mechanisms, all pretty awful research. And in the end, are euthanized, of course, and bodies examined. So, but I don't think if in many cases we have vaccines that we can use, and it would go a long way to protect the things like primates, animals like primates, who are clearly more like us than many other animals and are treated in the same way as most of the other animals in a research laboratory, and we treat them as though they're trash, really.
Okay, thank you, Liz. There's another question here. There are a lot of animal issues to cover with all areas of government. Is there a way to find out which issues are gaining traction so we can focus on and help change those issues and help them be successful?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at the municipal level, people who live, you guys who live in your communities across Canada, would know more about what's actually happening in your local community. For example, we get lots of complaints about the municipality is looking at doing a roundup and culling of Canada geese. So we know every year that around this time and towards the end of June and July, when the adult geese molt, they tend to hang out in parts where there's a water pond, and there tend to be multiple complaints about their activities there. So you know at this time, it's likely that council's going to have a pile of complaints about the geese. So it means that ahead of time, you can begin to examine that issue, talk to people on council, in your communities, in the parks, to see if you can organize a different way of handling the situation other than just rounding the birds up and killing them. So at the provincial level, it's a little bit more difficult because, like the federal level, not all of the legislation that's being considered is fully public unless you go to the website and you understand the whole mechanism of how legislation is made and so on. So, but I think often where there's controversy, there's news stories. I'm on the news all the time just to see if there are any controversies that are bubbling up in various parts of the country so that we can be prepared to deal with the situation as it comes. So news is a good resource. Often the counselor in your area or your MPP would or MLA would put out a written letter as to what they're doing, what the issues are in the community. And often they have public meetings. I would go to those. And the same with the federal ministers and federal MPs.
Okay, we've got another question that says, I'm going to a few campaign launches for candidates for city council in Calgary. Is there a particular issue that I should raise there other than Stampede?
I was going to say the Stampede because it's the one that probably needs, it gets lots of coverage though. Hmm, I would, I guess what I would say in Calgary, that there are probably a number of key environmental issues such as wetland protection, um, human wildlife conflicts between coyotes and deer, raccoons, and other animals that might hang out in municipalities and cause people grief. Those are issues. What we're pitching for in Toronto after the two coyotes were shot is to implement an ongoing wildlife human conflict prevention program. And so I think, given that more animals die as a result of being in conflict with human beings than really in many other areas, having pitching a wildlife strategy that talks about non-lethal intervention would be a fabulous idea.
Okay, so we've got another question. It says, sorry, there's a few questions here. A question of effectiveness, which follows upon the first comment regarding the refusal of local, provincial, and federal levels of government to attend to issues regarding animals. I'm referring here to the long drawn out campaign resulting in Bill C-355, which has been repeatedly stalled, even ignored. If we still can't get government to address this long-standing campaign, waiting it out isn't really an option, then what? And then there was an additional question attached to this question. Is there a relationship between AAC or the party and animal justice?
Yeah, animal justice. Interesting that you ask. We're in towards the end of June. We're going to court over ag-gag legislation in Ontario. Animal Justice is the lead agency that is going to court, and we've sought to be interveners in that case, which we've been approved for. So yes, we do work with Animal Justice for sure. With regard to, we often come up against cases that we just simply can't win at the time when the issue comes up. And I think it's very important to be able to acknowledge that and to be able to forgive ourselves that even though we've worked very hard and even though we've done everything that we have been told to do, the issue isn't going to pass. We worked through amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada to try and remove the idea in that piece of legislation that animals are property, that they are not sentient beings, that they're like a toaster or a television. You can, ditch them out the door if you want to, or you can, give them a great life. So it's really, we tried over multiple governments, multiple periods of time to actually get that legislation changed and could not. And it became so toxic that even raising the idea of looking at the criminal code became a problem. So we decided to back off that until we have a new government now. So, with a different focus on things. So we might very well have a much better chance at doing something about it this term, but we don't know yet. We'll have to try. The thing that really worked well was the ban on cosmetic animal testing in Canada. We were able to put together a coalition of groups, not only animal welfare and animal rights groups, but also industry. And we came together and provided the minister with the wording for the legislation, essentially. I mean, it was dealt with by Health Canada, but essentially, sorry, it was our recommendation. So um, they adopted it. It went through. So it depends on the time of day. It depends on the government in power. If we had had Mr. Polyev in power, I think we would have had a very difficult time getting much of anything with regard to animal protection through. Under this government, I think we have a chance.
Um, I have another question here. I know that my municipality has a dog bylaw, but we don't have a cat bylaw. Is it better to have a bylaw or not? And how might I get this addressed?
Well, that's a really good question because it depends on from what side of the fence you're sitting on, and it depends on where you live. In Ontario, we advocate for dog and cat bylaws, but the minute you have a bylaw like that in your community, the animals that end up in your pounds and shelters there are subject to the Animals for Research Act. And at the end of the day, although there's lots of opportunity to get that animal out of the shelter, if the pound keeper does not want to do that, he can fulfill an order from the research facility for any animals that they might want out of his pound. These are lost pet dogs and cats. So it's really important to know that if you're in Ontario, there's an upside to the bylaws. There's also a big downside to the bylaws. So I would advocate for the bylaws because I think in the long term, it gives better protection for dogs and cats. In the rest of Canada, there is no bylaw kick in. For example, um, in Manitoba, we worked in Winnipeg. The city of Winnipeg had a contract with the University of Manitoba for the dogs in their dog pound. And they took some 230 dogs a year out of that pound, and said that they were only going to use them for acute experiments. So they would do something and then kill them, which was actually factually not true. And we were able to get that contract canceled. So you have to look for different alternatives in different provinces. as to how the province might handle animals that end up in pounds and shelters in municipalities across the country.
Okay, we have another question here, and I just want to let everyone else know if you do have questions, you can type them in the Q&A just because we're getting to the last couple questions here. This is from Bernadette in BC who wanted to say hello to Liz and Leah. Um, and there is a question as well. Bernadette's concerned about the amount of bears that are being killed every year, and how can we get a real bylaw that fines instead of killing bears? I think the question is how can we
Stop it.
yeah, stop that. And
Yeah,
sorry, there is just a follow-up, also concerned about the wolf call up north.
right. Yeah. Hi, Bernadette. Nice to talk to you over Zoom. It's really lovely of you to be here. Um, yeah, BC has not a very progressive position on bears and wolves, and it's they are claiming to do it because they're trying to protect the endangered reindeer and other animals that are endangered that are predated upon by wolves and coyotes and bears from time to time. So they have an active program at shooting a large number of wolves every year. They collar a female of a pack, and so when they're looking for the pack, they remove the whole pack. They radio track her collar and shoot the entire pack, is how I understand it's done. They do it often from helicopters. And so there's been a huge effort on the part of many groups in BC and across the country to try and get this program stopped. Um, with with so far some marginal success, but not a lot of success. I think we just have to keep raising this issue because at the same time, BC is cutting down the endangered land that the caribou um, depend upon for their very survival. So, on the one hand, they're cutting down their very habitat. On the other hand, they're shooting the predators so they don't decline. So I think we just have to keep pounding away at that issue. And the same with the bear hunt. It's so interesting because, we have lots and lots and lots of people who want to protect bears, want to work hard to make sure that if a mom gets shot, the cubs get helped. There's been a number of cubs that have been orphaned in BC and some lost. That's true probably across the country because in most places we have a spring bear hunt. Bears are the only mammal that we hunt in the spring when they have dependent young, and and it's promoted as humane, tolerated by ethical hunters. I just don't get it. So I think we need to try to build again, as we did in Ontario when we got the spring bear hunt banned here. It's been reinstated, but it was banned for 15 years. I think we need to engage the more active, outward looking hunters, hunting community to speak out about the unethical nature of the spring bear hunt and the orphaning and see if we can't get the number of bears that are being shot reduced substantially.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions. There was one more question that just said maybe get sent a list of responsibilities of the level of governments. But I will say we do have we have resources that are being sent out at the end of like after this presentation. They'll come out in an email. So there will actually be a recording of this webinar. There will be the slides available for download. So earlier in the slides, there was a bit of a breakdown of the responsibilities of each level of government as it pertains to animal protection issues. So that will be there. And then if there's anything else that any other questions that come up, or you're reading through the information and you want to follow up, we will have our contact information available as well, so that you can call the office, you can email, and we will be able to answer more questions offline as well. Sorry, my dog decided to say hello. If there are any other questions, I've got the Q&A up. Otherwise, yeah, I think that was it. Great job, Liz. Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody who attended.
Okay, so with that, we will stop the recording. This webinar is coming to a close. But again, yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And you will get our follow-up email, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everybody.